70% of divorce in Western countries are initiated by women.
They initiated it, but then the process feels like it's happening to them.
The family that is close to you is not always the best counsel.
If I get something thrown my way and I just lash out and respond, guess what? I'm part of the problem.
Hi, beautiful people. Today I have the luxury to have Tracey with me. This will be interesting. She is an advocate for women that are navigating divorce. And as you know, I had my share on that. So I'm really interested to see a vision of freedom, how women, and I think most of it will also apply to men, navigating from where they are to a proper freedom and a proper life. So Tracey, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So Tracey, tell me, how did that started? How did you started becoming this advocate for women that are going through the challenge of divorce?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of us with our life's work, it began with my own experience. 5 years ago, I went through my own divorce. And like a lot of us, it was really challenging. It was probably one of the most challenging things that I have gone through. And also one of the most refining, inspirational things I've gone through. And I found after I kind of came out to the other side, women would seek me out for help or advice or to walk alongside them. And I just felt compelled to say yes to any woman that came to me. And then in the last year or so, I've been just formalizing it into now my life's work to be an advocate for women and walk alongside them as they navigate these waters.
That's a really interesting way of putting it. Like this way that you're reframing it as something that actually brought you more than it cost you is interesting, because a lot of people, when they go through the divorce, they only see the cost. They only see the pain. They forget that there is something after it.
I think a lot of people do see it like that. And we see this negative thing. Like a quote I really like is, a broken marriage isn't one that ends. It's one where you have to break yourself to stay in it. I first heard that from Glennon Doyle. But what I found was really, I and a lot of us would never choose divorce if the alternative was easier, right? We wouldn't go through it because it's so hard, right? But we know that on the other side, there is such growth and such freedom, like your listeners like to talk about and like you like to talk about. It truly is.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And we will go to your definition of freedom a little bit later. But what most people don't know is actually divorce, 33% of the divorce, around 33%, are high conflict divorce. And high conflict divorce are a really painful process. It's a really, really destructive and painful process for everyone involved. There is no good way. And this is, by the way, this is actually raising. It's not going down, the number of high conflict divorce compared to the number of divorces. And this is the one thing that I personally, by experience, also have discovered is like divorce is not always a choice.
Right.
It's come sometimes as a necessity before being a choice.
Yeah, I see all sorts of people coming my way, right? I see people who feel like it happened to them. And I see people who, probably the most common is they initiated it, but then the process feels like it's happening to them, right? Everything unravels in that acute stage of the actual divorce, the legal proceedings. It feels like it is happening to them. And the strong work that I do with women is to help put them back into the driver's seat so that they feel like they are moving toward where they want. And the foundation for all of that is alignment. So always finding your alignment, finding who you are, what you truly value, so you're not reacting against someone. That was your old self. That was your old marriage. You lived in that. And coming into alignment means working toward what is truly most important to you and no longer just reacting against someone.
Yeah, I was looking for that stat because I forgot it, the exact stat, but I don't know if you know that stat. This is actually something that I discovered during my divorce because I did a lot of research. 70% of divorce in Western countries are initiated by women. 70%. Still, if you speak to most of the people, they always think it's a man that initiates divorce as a higher rate.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
I think this is a lot about cultural bias and how society has been seeing that. Because let's look at marriage in its historic context. Marriage in its historic context was the man was working, bringing money, the woman was taking care of the house. And that has been not for 10 years, it's been hundreds of years. So in the back of our mind, in our cultural bias, this is how we see traditional families.
Right.
And then people don't see why a woman will leave because she has no substance to, provide for herself and things like this. And it's more difficult. And women are more caregivers and caretakers than men. and that's like, we all know that like men are less on the size of like, if you look at it, a simple statistic is in Norwegian countries, they try to have equality in jobs and put the same opportunity for everyone. Still, the number of nurses and the number of people that are in the caregiving system is majority women. They could do everything. They could be CEO, whatever they want. Still, why? Because I don't know if it's coming from our culture or genetics or the way our mind works. I have some assumption, but there is this more of a caregiver, caretaker, nurturing side of women that is far less present in man. So I think society sees that as a more drastic change for a woman that was caring and giving,
Yeah. I think the interesting thing that I'm seeing is we are kind of trying to equal things out on both sides with traditionally male and female roles, right? Because we're seeing women earning more money, and we're also seeing men being more involved in the caregiving of their children, being more present, taking on more of the roles domestically and rearing children. And so I think it's quite interesting that that as the decoupling happens, potentially we're moving toward a little more equilibrium for both parties because women have more financial resources, more stability in their career potentially. I know that was a rebuilding moment for me. And then men already have been used to going to doctor's appointments, being involved in schools, etc., doing bedtime. And so we're not seeing as a drastic change for the children, right?
Yeah. This, I have to say, there is one thing, and then this is experience also and research. If a child is involved in a divorce, the custody, majority of the time, will go predominantly to the mother. To a point that in Taiwan, for example, where I live, 95 to 99% of the time, the mother has custody of the children.
So here's a very interesting thing. I live in Seattle. I live in Washington in the US. And in my state, most of the time, custody is equally divided. So most of divorces result in 50-50 custody of the children.
Yeah. And I think that's a great thing. I think like this is because okay, not going into details of why my divorce started, but the big part of it was for my child. And then, as fathers, most of us, like mothers, want to stay in the life of the child as much as possible.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is reason for that not to happen, like violent behaviors, addictive behaviors, things like this. But and I don't know if you face that in your clients, because I think your clients is a subsection of divorcee in a certain way, because they already are searching to improve the process. But I've seen a lot of, and that's why I'm saying also the rise of high conflict divorce. One of the parent, being the woman or the man, is trying to fight to get as much as possible out of the other one.
Here's what I see a lot of, and exactly to that point. I see that the season of divorce, right, the 6 months to 2 years, the typical span of a divorce, it is so much about power and control from both sides. And usually starts with money and ends with children. And a huge part of the reason that I do the work I do is to keep people like in that alignment, the word I always come back to, so that you're focused on what truly you do want. And that elevates everyone in the process. It elevates your ex-partner. It elevates the experience for the children. And you stay focused on love. You stay focused on peace. And you stay focused on holistic goodness for everyone. When you stay down in that minutia of the money and of the battle of the time with the kids, everyone loses. There is no winner when you are battling for control. There's only a winner when you're battling for love, right? And that is really hard because there's hurt feelings. Again, there's money. Someone was left usually. There's ego. There's shame. There's fear. There's all the reasons in the world to stay low, to keep your vibration low, and to get pulled into a battle. And what I'm passionate about is helping women get out of that battle and say, no, I'm going to make this a good process. And a lot of times what that looks like is letting go of your own ego so that you are not contributing to the conflict. So you think, oh, I'm responding, he's the aggressor, I have a high conflict partner. No, but how you engage with that high conflict partner can escalate or de-escalate, right?
That's a true fact, and I can attest that by experience.
Exactly. Sounds like you have some stories.
Yeah, I have a lot of stories. No, but there is something that you say that it's really something that speaks to my heart, because I have asked myself that question a lot. Sometimes you have to fight for the child, for custody, for things like this, for many, many different aspects of it. And you have this fine line that you're trying to walk between your love for the child and protecting the child and your ego. And it's sometimes that fine line is difficult to know, is it my ego or is it really just for the child, or is it? And for me, I'm always asking my question, like, do I do the right thing for my son? And do I do the right thing for him? That's the one question. But I also see the reaction of the opposite party sometimes being more about the ego. And then they're like, am I into that? And I think a big part of freedom is to let go of the ego.
I 100% agree. I was actually just in my own personal life dealing with a situation yesterday, and I was really confused about which way to go and which way to react. And I had to stop and ask myself, what is my ultimate objective? What is my ultimate objective? And where in this is my ego coming out? And where is fear coming out? And it's really hard. It's easy to say those things out loud, but to actually untangle that in a situation and know how to properly react or respond is really hard. So always number one for myself and my clients, for all of us, I just say, when you are confused, when you don't really know, the absolute best thing you could do is nothing. Do nothing. Say nothing. Don't text. Don't email. Don't call your lawyer. Just stop. Stop and pause and recalibrate. There's nothing wrong with taking some time.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think a lot of, and my wife was a great support and a great kick me when I was gonna be overreacting for so many times, because there is also one thing that I've seen. The family that is close to you is not always the best counsel.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I 100% agree. I want to hear why you think that, but I have some thoughts on that too.
Yeah. They will always encourage you to do what they think is the best, while not realizing that they actually are most probably enticing you to do things on the moment, which may not be the best actually for everyone in the situation, being, the kids and everything. And you have to, say, thank you for the advice, but where am I going? What I'm doing there? If I do that, what is going to happen? Is it a good thing, or is it an ego thing because the family wants to support you and your side of the story?
Right. We all love that, the catching of the family. We love the holding of the family, but I think family is best to comfort and worst to advise, because what I've experienced is families love to operate in the worlds of shoulds. It should be like this. It should happen this way. And you know what? There's not a lot of shoulds that work out for how everyone wants them to work out in divorce. Shoulds go out the window. And also, it sounds like you have some experience with this. I do as well personally, and most of my clients are operating or dealing with people who don't necessarily operate within the lines. You're dealing, when you say high conflict divorce, it's easy to throw out words like narcissist or bipolar, whatever. I'm not really as concerned with the labels as I am with the strategy for how to deal with a situation. And usually our families are used to thinking, oh, in my place of work or in my marriage or in a very normal context, this is how things should and do operate. But when you're dealing with a high conflict person, when maybe you are being a high conflict person, things are not regular. And so that regular advice doesn't apply to you. And so I really think it is not good to go to your family, as sound like I've experienced. And it's best to go to a coach, go to a therapist, and definitely before your lawyer, right? Your lawyer is just there to do your bidding, and you can get yourself into trouble because your lawyer will just do whatever you want them to do. So it's best to calibrate first with your team of trusted advisors, right?
Yeah. I think that's something by researching high conflict divorce, one thing that I realized a lot. High conflict divorce are rarely mono-sided in the way that conflict, like there is an initiator of the high conflict divorce. So then generally the second part, which I call, is a reinforcer. So it means that your reaction, your way that you're behaving, is actually fueling also the conflict.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not mono-sided. It's not like just one do high conflict and then the other one does nothing. No, because then the person who has high conflict has no sounding board. So at one point they just stop reacting.
Right. One of the most powerful things that I did for myself, as I worked through my own divorce and just my life beyond, was really take a tremendous amount of accountability for myself and an inventory of what is mine to hold. How am I contributing to a conflict? How am I responding here? Am I aligned? That's why I always go back to this word. Am I aligned? Am I operating out of fear, or am I operating out of ego? Because if I get something thrown my way and I just lash out and respond, guess what? I'm part of the problem now, right? I am contributing to this negativity, and ultimately no one wins. And so it's my responsibility to not react, but to refine and change myself. A while ago, a friend of mine asked me, she had seen me through the acute time, the really hard time when you separate. It's just horrible, right? And she hadn't seen me in a few years, and she said, "Hey, has your partner changed? Has he mellowed out or calmed down?" Is what she said. And I said, I don't even think that is the right question to ask. The thing I can say to you is I've changed. I'm no longer in the business of telling you how someone else is doing, but I know I've changed, and I know I have gotten better. So yeah, things have gotten better because I'm more calibrated.
Yeah, I can tell by experience. That's how it works. It's not, people don't change.
How it works.
They don't change because you want them to change. You can impact your own behaviors. You cannot impact the other one. Okay, going out a bit of all of that, okay. Because after your divorce and doing what you're doing, what has become your personal freedom? What is freedom for you, and why is it so? This point is so important.
For me, freedom is really being able to access peace in every part of my day. So feeling like my day is filled with peace within myself is the ultimate freedom for me, right? I can go anywhere, I can interact with anyone, I can have all these things thrown my way. But for me, ultimate freedom is being able to maintain my equilibrium amidst anything, amidst any storm. And even more elevated, be able to have joy and delight amidst that.
And I'm sure this definition changed through time to arrive to what it is today.
Yeah.
What was for you the pivotal moment, this click that happened that made you define it that way?
I love that question. I know I can tell you exactly when. I moved into the house I'm in now when I moved out of my house. And my life prior for both parties had been filled with, I think a common sentiment is like, you're walking on eggshells, or just a lot of stress in the home. Like you're just feel kind of sick to your stomach, or doesn't feel easeful, right? And so I had that in my home. I moved into this home, and I remember I woke up in my bed, and I had this feeling of excitement. You know, the feeling like it's your birthday, or there's a big celebration that day, or your podcast is being released, or something exciting is happening. And so you have this kind of excitement, almost like a kid. And I woke up with that feeling, and I was like, oh, what exciting thing is happening today? And I stopped for a moment, and I thought about my day, and I was like, oh, nothing exciting is happening. I just feel at peace. This is just peace. And I get to live my whole day in this feeling. And that for me defined the entire year after my divorce. I just saw out peace in everything. It was my ultimate litmus test. Is this bringing me closer to peace or further away? If it's closer, I say yes. If it's further away, I say no. Made it simplified, right?
Yes, that's an interesting part, because one thing that I've come to hear from people on the podcast and my clients and all of that, peace is not that easy to achieve.
No, it's not.
Peace is not. And measuring your life to measuring your peace, it seems like a really good idea, actually. But how do you actively do that?
I think for me, anyway, there's the big things, right? Oh, you can take out this marriage or change the job. I think that it's almost easier to focus on the big things. But what I do for myself and teach others to do, or help walk alongside them as they do, is how do you do micro-calibrations, right? Like, how can you feel aligned in this little moment? And it could be, for me, it was a little decision. The first night when my kids would go back to be with their dad, I would go watch the sunset by myself. It's available to me. It's right out there. It feels peaceful. Or it would be picking flowers, little things. Or it would just be making sure I'm telling the truth, or I'm saying yes to things that feel more aligned and no to things that aren't. It's little things, little tiny things. And in a moment, it's like tuning a guitar. Like, if you feel it's a little off, stop and think of what is the smallest, simplest thing I can do to feel more at peace right now. The littlest thing, right? Because that's how you build your life.
Yeah, I think that's. I don't know if you know the 1% theory. If you change your life every day by 1%, the compound is amazing. And people think you need to do big changes, but big changes doesn't happen that easy, and generally they take a long time. But small incremental changes, you can do that every day.
Right. I mean, I think of it like, think of whatever habit you do best at, right? Like, you're consistent at working out, you're great at cooking healthy meals, or you love to walk, or you spend time with your partner. Like, we all have something in life where we're doing it really well, and that pattern has become a default. And there's no reason why we can't extend that same way of thinking to another area of our life and another area. It just feels really hard, but it only feels hard when you look at the boulder. But if you chip it down into a little piece of sand you move every day, it's not trite. It's not like, I think sometimes it feels overwhelming when you're looking at the massive change or the big thing in life, but it's just take action. Take action on a little thing that you can do. How did you start your podcast? You researched the platform, right? You took action. Okay, then you researched your equipment. You did one step. It wasn't just like tomorrow you had everything up and running. You just did another thing, checked another thing, checked another thing, and look, oh my gosh, here you are.
Yeah, I will continue on the example because you choose a really interesting one. I had all the equipment before starting the podcast because I was already teaching online and everything. But I was ready to do the podcast because of the compound thing that I did before. So I was building on a foundation. If I had to start the podcast without that foundation, then I would have to do more work.
Right.
That would have been a big thing. But it would have been the same steps, just it would have taken me longer.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I teach a lot of people about my framework, the One Freedom framework, there is one thing. People don't realize that habits take less energy than doing something that is not an habit. So, and we have, during the day, we have a limited amount of energy. We have a limited amount of time, but what we have even less is energy during the day and focus. So when you're starting doing those small changes, you're basically incrementally creating new habits. And because after some time they become habits, the energy and focus needed to make them become smaller and smaller and smaller, which give you more space for more change and more things.
Absolutely.
And so the compound effect in if you look at 1 year or more, what happened is your energy spending at the start is higher, and then it starts decreasing. And your focus and energy decrease, while the changes in your life and the positivity actually rise exponentially. Right.
I think that, like you, I'm sure you experienced, and I did as well, when you when you finally get through a big, hard change, like divorce, right? You get through it, you realize how much space you have in your life because it took so much energy away from you to deal with the negative. And then when you start doing, and what I try to help people do as early as possible is adding in those habits and make as many of them as possible automated. So you decide once, right? Like I decide once, I do not respond to text messages to my ex after 8 p.m. I decide once, if I have time with my kids, I don't make plans with other people. I decide once that I will, whatever it is, you decide once on a healthy habit and you never have to consider doing that again. And then you decide another thing once and you just keep building on that. And then all of a sudden the thing that at first took some energy to not respond to that message or whatever, it's just not, I don't even think about it anymore, right? Because it's just your habit and it frees up all the space. It's like how you compound, like you're talking about the 1%, that's how your growth compounds exponentially, because all of a sudden you've freed up all of the space in your life for goodness, for alignment, for what you actually want.